Hey guys, welcome back to Total Tactics FPL. Today's video is going to be my Game Week 18 team selection, and this video is actually recorded just before the City game has actually taken place. I'm actually going to be going to bed shortly, unfortunately, because I'm in Hong Kong and it's around 2 a.m. here. But I would like to record my thoughts on my Game Week 18 team selection, barring any kind of huge injury news within the City game. I'm expecting that the only updates that we would have gotten so far is that City would probably have destroyed Leeds, but that's going to be my expectation. Hopefully that happens, and that would kind of result in me having a green arrow. At this point in time, though, I think the most pressing concern within the FPL community is not only just Mitrovic and actually how you can actually work around moving towards him, but simply how to address the REECE James issue and what the replacements are possible. I've created a list of 5 defenders outside of the top 2 picks, in my opinion, that are by default already in our teams, and that's going to be Trippier and Cancelo. So with Trippier and Cancelo excluded, I've brought 5 picks here that I think will suit different team scenarios and different team situations. What you have to sort of think about now is, in terms of Game Week 18, do you actually need to move out of REECE James immediately? Don't you have someone as a 4th, 5th defender who you can actually bring in Game Week 18 and play instead? And potentially you can use the 2 double transfers in Game Week 19 to actually make a much more powerful play. If you don't want to do that, or you don't feel like you have strong picks, such as if you have Patterson and Bueno doubled up as your 4th, 5th defenders, then I can completely understand moving into someone else immediately in Game Week 18, because there's a lot of attacking upside that we can get with a lot of these picks already. I think all 5 of these assets that I've shown on screen have great fixtures anyways in Game Week 18. So if we talk about Botman first, I think he's the most interesting because so far on Twitter actually illustrated the great rotation capabilities between Newcastle and Chelsea. And simply put, I think a lot of people have banked into the double Chelsea asset punt because of the attacking upside of James, not specifically because Chelsea have good defensive fixtures, because we know that this Chelsea team have been rather defensively frail. And now I think a lot of people think that there's no more upside in going for a double Chelsea defense, because that second fixture in that double game week is going to be City anyway. So you could simply move into another team that actually is a true good defense and has actually been backed up by underlying stats. And I think therefore Botman's a great pick if you'd like to double up on the Newcastle defense. If you're still kind of interested in this Chelsea defense simply because the fixtures are good and they have a double, then you could simply go to someone like Azpilicueta. And Azpilicueta is more interesting to me than someone like Cucurella because he's much cheaper as a pick, and he also has similar kind of rotation issues that Chilwell will bring in for Cucurella. And of course, REECE James will probably come back in around 4 to 5 weeks' time, but we know that he's 100% going to be eased in. So I think Azpilicueta is actually quite safe from rotation for the time being, and I think he does fit into both a tactical structure in terms of a back 4 and a back 5. As far as some of the other assets here, we have Shaw, and I think Shaw is probably actually my best and most favorite pick here, simply because he actually has the attacking upside, but also the defensive upside now. The reason why Shaw's kind of expected points picture is very, very poor in comparison to what we actually expect of him as a player, specifically after that kind of 8-point performance in the previous match, is just because he has to play Arsenal and City within his next 5. So this is a little bit of a kind of picture in terms of the medium term, but I think long term Shaw might be a fantastic pick, because once those Arsenal and City fixtures go, and if you have enough coverage of Shaw in those specific 2 games, then you could actually just look at going for Shaw to cover the next 2 weeks and then trying to attack the future with a long-term pick who's going to hold a lot of value, because this United defense have been valued or evaluated because they were a poor defense in the previous year. We know Dalot and Shaw have been great picks so far when they've actually been able to play the 60, 70 minutes versus some of the mid-table bottom half teams. And I do think United will have some great games. They've also been very defensively strong versus teams outside of the City game. So in terms of the kind of top 4 opponents that we would project them to kind of struggle with. And I think that's why Shaw's possibly the most exciting pick if you have enough of a kind of replacement for that kind of hole, which is going to be that City and Arsenal fixture. As far as someone like a Robertson, he's going to be one of those attacking upside picks that you can go for if you have a lot of money in the bank, but I don't really recommend Robertson simply because we have so much value within teams this year in Newcastle and specifically Arsenal. That's why I've recommended someone like Gabriel. You could obviously as well go into someone like White, who's a little bit cheaper than Gabriel. I think White's going to be nailed for the rest of the season, whereas you can see clearly that there is some rotation with Tierney and Zinchenko, whereas White has absolutely nailed down that right back position. He might get subbed at 65, 75 minutes, but that could usually be quite a positive. Unless you're getting subbed off at 51 minutes like REECE James, that should actually nail you a clean sheet, and it does save you a lot of money Also, you don't actually feel like you're forced to play someone like White week to week. And so therefore you can play other assets and potentially play with much more rotation in this kind of defensive structure. And I think we have enough good teams now in FPL that we can rotate through the fixtures, specifically select players from the defensive positions who have good fixtures, as opposed to kind of perma playing players. Because the only two players, as I said, who should be perma played in the future are going to be Trippier and Cancelo, but we already have them in our team. So that third spot can be just a perma rotation spot. And I think that's why it's interesting to maybe go into White if you like to downgrade. However, Gabriel actually has the best projected numbers, and we've seen this season and in previous years that he has been able to score and be an absolute set piece menace, specifically next to Saliba, where Saliba has that kind of 4 yellow card issue with suspension, which makes Gabriel much more exciting as a pick. So that's kind of my thoughts on the REECE James replacements. Moving on to my team, let's actually start with my defense. And going back to the topic that I mentioned earlier with REECE James, you can be in two camps. You can actually roll the transfer and actually think about making a much more powerful play in Game Week 19, which is my plan here, as you can see, because I brought White in, and therefore REECE James will actually fall towards the back of my bench. And you can just simply play with that, because I think you've brought in, hopefully, a fourth defender who actually has a good game in Game Week 18, or a relatively good game. I don't think Brighton is an easy fixture by any means for Arsenal, but this is a good enough fixture for me to not really consider a straightforward transfer and a replacement for REECE James, because, as I said, that City game, if I go for like replacements on like Cucurella or Azpilicueta, doesn't seem that appetizing in a double game week, and I already have Kepa anyways for that fixture. And it probably makes more sense for me to actually create a plan to go towards Mitrovic in the future, because I didn't actually capitalize on the price rise of Mitrovic. I didn't move Martial into Mitrovic because I think Martial is exciting enough versus Wolves for me to not consider the transfer towards Mitrovic and put myself in a potentially worse situation if Mitrovic, let's say, gets a yellow card in the future. So my plan is to go Trippier and Cancelo and Kepa as well. Ward isn't going to play. He simply just has that really, really tough fixture versus Liverpool, and then Cancelo and Trippier, fantastic games where they get to play Everton and Leeds at home. You might even want to suggest, let's say, going into another Newcastle defender. As I said, Botman is a great pick to go for if you think he's going to have a much better chance of getting a kind of clean sheet, and he's in a very comparable situation to White, because White probably isn't someone that you look to get a lot of attacking upside out of. Then you could just go for Botman and maybe choose him to be one of your much more stronger third kind of rotation piece alongside someone like White in the future, because they do rotate games quite well if you also have a Chelsea asset, which some people do if they already have Cucurella. Moving into the midfield, I'm keeping with the same structure here, and of course the big glaring hole is Almiron, but fortunately a lot of my midfield assets hold anyways. We'll see what happens to Kevin De Bruyne. I don't actually know exactly what happens in the future, so maybe I might be much more concerned over Kevin De Bruyne in the morning. But for now, I think Saka, Rashford, Martinelli, De Bruyne is still exciting, and there's no reason to go immediately into Salah. Let's say if De Bruyne blanks, I'm still probably going to keep De Bruyne in my team. I don't have a straightforward way to go towards Salah, and the more pressing issue is James. That is somewhat covered by my ability to play White in this fixture here versus Brighton. Brighton didn't actually look particularly lethal versus Southampton, but they did score an absolute banger through the March goal. And I do think, of course, Brighton did shock Arsenal within one of the cup games recently, but that was actually a second-string Arsenal side. So in my opinion, there is a good chance for Arsenal anyways to keep a clean sheet here. We know that they're very much capable of doing so. And Rashford, Martinelli, Saka, all great picks to actually go for, because the attacking upside of these teams is incredibly high, even though they are playing away from home. We are starting to see that both United and Arsenal are capable of dominating most of their opponents, even in the mid-table, despite Brighton's position in the league right now being in the top 7. As far as the forwards, if we move into that position there's going to be a lot of discussion about Mitrovic and what I plan to do with him as an asset. Yes, I think there's an easy plan here to think about how to assess Darwin after a Leicester game, which should be a quite easy game, and what to do with him there. Because after the Brentford game, which I think is probably his last interesting game from an attacking point of view, he gets to play Brighton, Chelsea, and Wolves. And those 3 games aren't as interesting, I would say, to keep him over. And I think that there is therefore some scope to move into other cheaper assets in the forward positions in the future. And simply put, maybe Havertz could be that sort of punt if he gets to be nailed in that Chelsea team. You could also downgrade him there, but Mitrovic is probably the most exciting pick to go for if you already are kind of sick and tired of Darwin. I would say just give him at least the benefit of the doubt with this week in Game Week 18, and then think about your plans in Game Week 19, because you could move into a pick like Havertz or Mitrovic as your Game Week 19 captain when Darwin plays versus Brentford, because that could be much more exciting anyways, and you could save a lot more money in the bank. But I wouldn't do that just so soon, because I think we have more pressing issues in our team, and it's probably worth rolling if you're in a situation where you want to make a luxury transfer out of Darwin for now. The only managers who should really be moving out of their forwards into someone like Mitrovic really are people who own Wilson, unfortunately, because based on the Eddie Howe press conference, we know it seems like Wilson isn't ready to play, or at least consistent minutes for that Leeds game, even though that looks so exciting on paper. Almiron is going to be a big miss this week in the midfield, but I don't really think there's anything I can do about it, simply because Andreas has great upside in Game Week 19 when I play him, and I feel like that's enough of a justification to sidestep Almiron for now anyways, because my midfield had been relatively strong, specifically the budget picks. And then Haaland, there's nothing really else to talk about with him. He's going to be my captain once again. There could be an argument for Salah owners to actually think about, let's say, captaining Salah this week. I unfortunately will be keeping De Bruyne in my team. Unfortunate or not, hopefully De Bruyne does well versus Leeds. But I think Haaland's going to be a fantastic captain versus Everton. I really can't see past taking the captaincy off of him this week. So thank you guys so much for watching the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.